Thank you for joining me for this segment of Virtual Coffee with Vikas as we highlight emerging trends and innovations in the world of healthcare, security, privacy, compliance, risk management, and digital health. Throughout this segment, we'll share additional context for our discussion in the caption areas above. Now, welcome Serge. Serge and I have known each other for quite a few years and have a somewhat intertwined business relationship. Serge was formerly CEO of CareSpeak. That's when we met, when your company became a customer of our company, Enterprise Health. In fact, Enterprise Health relocated its headquarters and CareSpeak ended up moving into our space. In fact, Serge took over the office that was my office when I was still at that location. So what a small, weird world. We're also kindred spirits in our passion to advance healthcare through technology innovations that can scale. Like me, Serge is a serial entrepreneur, having recently completed a successful exit of CareSpeak. He's now paying it forward by advising young entrepreneurs and is an active angel investor. He lives in New Jersey, but hails from Croatia, a region he remains closely connected to both personally and professionally. He's really enlightened me about the growing pool of very talented entrepreneurs and technologists that are creating amazing companies and products in Central and Southeast Europe. So welcome, Serge.
Thanks for having me, Vikas.
So for this particular chat, we're going to be really going into and exploring the entrepreneur's perspective of two specific areas: how to successfully navigate security, privacy, and compliance requirements in highly regulated industries like healthcare, but not your typical best practices stuff. We'll talk about things you can't learn other than through difficult but ultimately successful experiences. And we'll delve into tech innovations that are going to truly transform home healthcare, specifically in the elderly population, which is a constant concern for people like me, Serge, and anyone over 30 or 35 with aging parents. And by all projections, this is an area poised for massive growth, but with significant business challenges. So Serge, as I always like to start these chats, I'd like to ask my guests about their spirit animal so we can get a little personal perspective on you. So tell us, what is your spirit animal and why?
Sure. So this is a difficult question. I thought about it, and I realized when I was a child, I really loved horses, and since I believe that we're the most intuitive and in touch with our true nature as a child, I'll pick horses, or horse is my spirit animal because of their beauty, elegance, strength, and also loyalty. So I'll go with that.
I can totally see that. So let's giddy up and get into our first topic. Healthcare in general and life sciences and pharma in particular are market segments that have significant regulatory and risk management challenges for entrepreneurs and executive teams trying to grow or innovate in the space. The ability to navigate these hurdles can really determine the velocity and maybe even the viability of a business, but really applies to any highly regulated industry. As CEO of CareSpeak, you specifically addressed these issues and were successful, able to grow your business and get your clients, many of which are huge, slow to move pharma companies, to innovate for the benefit of patients and providers. So let's talk about this from three angles: identifying the gotta haves, i.e. table stakes, understanding how to navigate industry-specific regulations, and inspiring an innovation mindset within your customers. So Serge, before we get into these three particular topics, let's really talk about your background in healthcare and specifically how you got involved with life sciences.
Sure. So I really always say I grew up at Johnson & Johnson, first in the medical device sales area in Europe, and then on the consumer packaged goods or consumer healthcare side in the United States. And the reason I say that is that I believe that Johnson & Johnson is one of the premier training grounds, especially for brand management, which really encompasses not the brand, but the whole process of discovery of a new product opportunity in the marketplace, bringing that product to the market, sales, advertising, branding, and so on and so forth. So that's really kind of my entry into healthcare was J&J through medical devices.
And also headquartered here in New Jersey.
That's right.
Little plug for New Jersey. I saw this firsthand since CareSpeak was one of our customers, but we talked before about the gotta haves, table stakes. So tell us a little bit of why you invested so heavily in CareSpeak's security and privacy program right from the get-go.
Yeah. So I'm for the audience members who who are entrepreneurs or trying to do this, just one first highlight, which is that you just don't know what you don't know. And you will notice that a lot of the entrepreneurs in healthcare tend to be somewhat older because they've had some experiences in healthcare. So, when I started, I didn't know what I didn't know. And, but it became very obvious to me very quickly that security and privacy are basically the cost of entry, right? It's just a must have. And then, we actually, the way we got into really making it the core competence, there's really two factors to it. Number one, my co-founder, CTO, was a security nerd. He actually had, NATO military level access in Europe on previous projects. He was an ethical hacker certified. And he really, when he built the platform, he built it from the first code on with security in mind. So the reason I say this, a lot of times people will build a platform and then they want to retrofit security into it. Technologically, it's really, really hard and really expensive. Yeah. So that's really important. The second thing is we were working on a project with United Healthcare and Merck. And basically, United Healthcare told us that, going forward, all new vendors will have to be HITRUST certified. And at that time, we were a relatively small company with small revenues, profitable, but with small revenues. Investing into HITRUST was a significant investment. So for me as the CEO and a self-funded bootstrap company that I founded in 2011, this was around 2016, 17 that we started working with you guys. It was a big decision financially, but I figure if I do this right now, I'm going to be ahead of the curve. And it turned out to be very true from the standpoint, not only did it make the whole process of security and privacy reviews with our clients faster and easier, but also when we got acquired, post-acquisition, they told us that one of the big reasons why they liked us after looking at more than 24 of companies was the fact that we had HITRUST certification, because it basically took off the table some of the concerns they had for young and new companies.
Yeah. And I think, whether it's HITRUST, whether it's NIST, framework adoption is just so key today to have a holistic really security and privacy and compliance program. So let's delve into sort of the second area, which is, okay, so we established table stakes. We know we've got a good security program in place. That's going to get us through the front door. It's going to get us through the sales process, if you will, smoothly. Now, once you started working in space, tell us about some of the challenges that I know you face relative to regulatory environments, regulatory mandates that you really had to comply with, sort of that next check, if you will.
Yeah, I'd say, we like 90% of our client base were pharmaceutical manufacturers. So we also had contracts with payers, with health plans. What the first kind of big learning for me that I was really surprised is that pharmaceutical manufacturers are actually more conservative than the health plans in terms of their security and privacy requirements. There was also some misconceptions. They would ask, are you HIPAA compliant, which really doesn't apply to pharma companies, but we had to just say yes and then educate them, why we are, but why it doesn't apply to them. So you have to do some education, but basically there are two components to that process in pharma. Number one is the privacy and security piece that is done by their IT group, right? Mm-hmm. And it's basically a checklist that you get, and you have to then go through it, and you have to show evidence. However, once we had the HITRUST document, we could just send the document, and we really made the job much easier for the people in pharma because they had an established standard that was certified by a third independent party, a 200-page report basically saying, check, 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 check. So so they loved us for it because we made their job very, very easy. So that's one part. The other part was what is called the LMR, legal regulatory and marketing review. And it's basically a standard review in pharmaceutical companies, and they may have different acronyms for it, but basically before they go to market with anything, it needs to go through this checklist of things. And there's two other regulations that mattered in this specific space. One is called fair balance. And that's basically a FCC regulation that requires that anytime a pharmaceutical manufacturer makes a claim or benefit for their drug, they have to have a balanced representation of all the risks that come with that drug, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's tricky because it's executionally tricky, because actually it's really not balanced, because the benefit might be one sentence and then legal forces you to put a paragraph of side effects on it. So it's actually balanced to the, disproportionate balance to the negative. So it's just an executional challenge, but you have to know how to navigate it. And, and there's different levels of fair balance in terms of stringency. So like a black box warning is the most conservative and extreme. So you need other tactics for it. So that's one. In our specific case, because we dealt with text messaging based interactions, really the consent management process, which falls under also the FCC guidelines for TCPA, or Telephone Consumer Protection Act, to ensure that we have provided adequate consent in onboarding, that we have collected adequate consent from the consumer or patient, and also that we give them a very easy way to opt out of this program. And then lastly, obviously, there's a number of things you need to do in terms of transparency, providing patients with access to the information if they want it. So you have to have procedures in place to show that you can provide them with their data if they require it, right? Gotcha. And then you have some, specifics for California. There's some specifics for Massachusetts. So there's some state-specific things that you need to worry about. But I think the most important thing about this from an executional standpoint that, is not written in any books, so to say, is like, well, how do you manage this process? Yeah. And what we learned really, it is our job to educate our clients. So whoever holds the budgets from which the project gets paid, usually is the marketing brand person on that brand. We have to educate them on the process. And then we have to ensure that we quote unquote pre-sell it to the key stakeholder or holders within that committee that reviews it. So we would always advise our client to get us in a one-on-one meeting with the key stakeholders, which is usually the lawyers, where we basically, with a very well-designed chart and a lot of competency and know-how on the subject matter, take them through all the challenges that they face and how we basically ensure that there's no issues around it. And then there's a third component I should talk about. A lot of pharma people are very sensitive about, which is reporting of side effects, right? Because there's a regulation by which the FDA requires, if somebody reports a side effect on your drug, you have 24 hours to report it to the FDA in a specific process. So you have to also put processes and procedures to either prevent a reporting, in the sense that the communication is limited to preset responses. So you cannot have an open-ended response, or you have to have a mechanism by which you capture it and in a very efficient way forward it to their what's called pharmacovigilance group or safety, right? So we've handled all of these different scenarios and had systems in place for that. So ultimately, what you're really doing, you're ensuring that you have all the risks identified and you have mechanisms and process in place to ensure that they're all managed, appropriately. So that's really what it boils down to. And although your product must be doing something totally different, but this is the main prerequisite of demonstrating this capability before you can actually even be considered for, to get to the next stage, which is actually implementation and eventually execution or launch it to the marketplace.
Well, that is really fascinating how it's sort of these three gates that you have to, there are major hurdles you have to get to actually get to an implementation. I think so many entrepreneurs, especially those that are addressing life sciences, healthcare, come into it thinking we have a great product, we have a great technology, but you're really highlighting all the other business acumen that you have to apply in order to actually get to the point where you can actually sell a product to a customer, get them to adopt it, get them to implement it. And I think that whole buy-in of that stakeholder committee, if you will, internal, legal, marketing, I'm sure there's various other constituents that were there as well, is really, I think, important for entrepreneurs to really understand, how to navigate all of that.
Yeah, I'd like also to add for the entrepreneurs is that a lot of time entrepreneurs will fall in love with their product. It could be a great product. It could truly, generate better outcomes for the patient. But ultimately, none of that matters if you don't understand how the money flows. And a lot of entrepreneurs forget to do their homework while they're working their product, understanding how does the money flow? Is it a revenue generator activity? Is it a cost saving activity? You have to understand, that whole flow of money to understand what's in it for that individual whose budget you're tapping into.
Yeah. So is there any one last nugget that you would give to an entrepreneur that's sort of just getting into, launching a company, maybe trying to grow it, to scale it? Are there any nuggets that you learned along the way with CareSpeak? I know you had incredible success and you scaled, tremendously as you went through. Any nugget that you can leave to them that would hopefully help them?
Well, look, there's quite a few. I'm not sure how to prioritize them, but I will tell you, now that I'm working on my, on the next thing, I think it's way harder today to start a company than it was in 2011, simply because there's so much more going on. There's so much more activity. When I started in 2011, people thought, you're going to use text message for healthcare, you must have lost your mind, right?
Yeah,
now everybody's doing it. So that's one thing. I'd say the most important characteristic is really grit. And there's been a lot of stuff written on that. There's actually a great TED Talk by Angela Duckworth on research on grit as a quality. I think that's a must, because a lot of times people quit just too early. On the other side, you have to know when to quit also. And nobody can tell you that. You have to feel your way through it. Yeah. And I've noted, in my experience, entrepreneurship journey is a very bipolar experience. You're just going up and down all the time. And you have to read the tea leaves and decide, what you're going to do next. And people, what I also noticed a lot of times, a good example with these TCPA regulations around consent management, I actually took the time to spend a whole weekend reading a directive from the hearings at the FCC. Most people just say, "Oh, my lawyer will take care of it." Well, no. Yeah. You need to do your homework so you can have a good conversation with the lawyer. And if you really know your product inside out, and if you know inside out your customer base and their processes, you can help the lawyer be creative with you in how you change the process, adapt it, how you wordsmith it, and so on and so forth. So it's really important. I believe that a true entrepreneur digs into the details, and obsessive compulsive disorder is actually a good quality when you're an entrepreneur, because the last 1% makes the big difference between good and great.
Yeah, those are terrific words. Hey, listen, if it was easy, everyone would do it, as they say, so it is hard, tough work, but obviously, you're a great example of how it can pay off, and ultimately the reward is worth it. Not only, some personal benefit, but you really changed the way communications happened with a lot of these companies and their patients, which is obviously only to their benefit. So terrific. Thank you so much.
Sure.